All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is the Lake County Housing Authority's Housing Counseling Program Safe Banking Workshop. My name is Liz Warning. I am the Director of Housing Counseling here at the Lake County Housing Authority. Our office in Lake Zurich is on Lakewood Lane. We also have another office in Grayslake, but we are physically hosted here in Lake Zurich. We also, once a week, are at the Waukegan County Courthouse. That's Thursdays from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., where we run the court eviction help desk. We always have somebody on staff there. If you're at the courthouse on Thursdays, we are outside room C 3404. No, excuse me, C404. So you're welcome to come and see us. If not, you're always welcome to come visit us at the Lakewood Lane address in Lake Zurich, or if we're having an in-person presentation somewhere else, we always, of course, put that notification on our website. So this is the list of services that LCHA provides, both in workshop format. Today's workshop is considered a financial literacy workshop. We also provide these services one-on-one. They are for free, of course, as this workshop was, and open to everyone in Lake County. There are some services that are offered to folks outside Lake County as well, but we try to focus on our core demographic of residents of Lake County, Illinois. This includes everything from financial literacy, like today's workshop, fair housing, budgeting, credit improvement and repair, rental counseling, pre-purchase first-time home buyer, home purchasing, and then what's called post-purchase is basically if you already own a home but you're not in delinquency or anything like that. There's several topics in there, things like reviewing your property taxes and getting information about refinancing versus getting a home equity loan. And then, of course, foreclosure prevention, which is if you're in dire straits or had an emergency or crisis, or you just don't want to be in foreclosure, that's the interventions we provide for that as well. If you are interested in one-on-one counseling, this QR code here will take you to our intake form. You're welcome to sign up for services with myself or our other HUD certified housing counselor, Dulce Madrigal. All right. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of the workshop, I'm just going to do some housekeeping. Everybody who's in the workshop as a participant is muted. We do record all of our workshops, so if you don't want to see your gorgeous face on our YouTube page, please go ahead and turn off your cameras. The chat is open for your comments or your questions, which we will address in the Q&A section all the way at the end. Until then, I don't really look at the chat. I'm just here by myself. So I will, please, if you could, just put everything in the chat till now, and I promise if you have a question, we can address it at that point. Or if you wanted to just ask the question in the Q&A section, that's going to be great as well. So let's look at today's workshop, shall we? In today's session, we're going to review some of the more common banking products that can potentially increase the amount of monthly banking fees, and if those make it more expensive for you to keep your money in checking or in savings. Ultimately the goal is to keep everybody banked, make sure that we are paying as little fees as humanly possible and letting our money have a purpose for us, not just paying to house our money somewhere that earns a low interest rate, right? So we're going to be reviewing a bunch of things. We're going to go over the actual bank statement itself, how to read, what to look for, the importance of actually reading your bank statement once a month, as opposed to taking it, being horrified that it arrived and throwing it in the trash. We'll also be looking at overdraft protection practices, add-on products, and then the definition of bank malpractice, and some things that banks may not do that are that aren't so savory, and then of course protecting yourself through either complaints or the laws that actually protect us. All right, so first thing first, during this workshop I talk about banks. Obviously there are many types of banks, right? So you have three major categories. For the purposes of the workshop, I'm just going to say the word bank to refer to all three of these at the same time. So the way we define banks is really who regulates them and what laws they have to comply to. So you've got the first, which is the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or OCC. Those are all national banks and Federal Savings Associates, right? You've got credit unions, and then you've got FDIC state chartered banks. So in your personal life, you can belong to one or more of these. For example, I have 3 banks on my own. I have a USAA bank account, Chase Bank, and then another credit union, BCU. Obviously, USAA and BCU are both credit unions, so those would be monitored and regulated by the NCUA, and then Chase Bank, BOA, PNC, TCF, all the alphabet soup banks, those are going to be regulated by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And this is going to come up later as to why this is important. All right, reviewing your bank statement. This is the real base on which we support everything, right? So it's all good and well to know what regulations protect you and how to identify charges that may not be legitimate on your bank account, but you're not going to be able to do that unless you're actually looking at your bank account, right? So this is the ability to read your statement allows you to identify those predatory practices, allows you to recognize hidden fees, unauthorized charges, etc. The long and the short of it is, if you're not reading your bank account, how do you know that you still have a subscription from 2018 to a product you don't use anymore, or that your children are spending $150 on Roblox or something like that? So we'll get into it, but to the point, reading your bank statement is critical if we're going to do any more of this information, if it's going to pertain to your life. All right, so I always like to add a couple of quizzes in here. How often does your bank have to send you a statement, right? If you're interested in taking a guess, you can put the number in the chat or just keep it to yourself. But I'll speed run this. The answer is 2. So your bank does not have to send you a monthly bill. They don't have to send you an annual statement, though many do send you both a monthly and an annual statement. They're set up for that. But per the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, your bank needs to provide you a statement quarterly, at least. And that is only if you make an EFT transaction once per month. So if you make more than 1 EFT transaction per month, it has to be a monthly statement. Does that make sense? So less than 1 EFT per month, it's quarterly. More than 1 EFT per month, it's monthly. So an EFT or electronic funds transfer includes many things. It could be ATM withdrawal or deposit. It could be if you use your debit card, either tap to pay, or if you use your PIN at a debit card transaction, payment you made through online bills for utilities, or shopping on Amazon or shopping on eBay, something like that. It also can include direct deposits. So if your employer pays you through direct deposit every month, that's an EFT transaction. Now, you don't necessarily have to wait, of course, to get your bank statement once per month. You can always get it, online. Many of our banks, if not all, have some sort of online access, either through an app or a website you can go to. Okay, let's take a look at the statement. There is some standardized information, right? So we're going to go 3 chunks because it's difficult to get a full statement on the screen at once. So 3 chunks. We're going to go through the top, the middle, and the bottom of the statement itself. So at the top, you're going to find some standardized information. You get your bank information. So up here we've got Sunnyside Bank. Typically it's the bank information, and as well as their main address or the address for correspondence, right? You've got on the opposite side in this circumstance, you've got your bank information, the account data. So, what type of account is it? Is this a checking account? Is this a savings account, a money market account, what have you, right? You're going to get the number of the account and then the statement period or the statement date. And that is very important. We'll talk about this a little later about okay, what does this mean for me as far as the statement periods go? This is important to note. You are going to also find, of course, your information, your name and address, everything like that. That's important to note. A lot of people, when they look over their bank statements, they see their own name, not seeing that there is probably, in some cases, a secondary name. So if you opened it as a minor and you've got a custodial account, mom and dad might still be on the account even though you're over 18. Or perhaps you've got an ex-spouse or ex-partner that you opened it with. If that's something that you don't want on your bank statement anymore, that needs to be addressed at the banking level. That might be a little complicated, but to a point it's worth it, and we'll find out a little bit later why that is. And then lastly, the top of the page typically includes your beginning balance or your ending balance. At the very least, it should involve those two numbers: beginning balance as of the statement period beginning date, and then your ending balance as of the statement period end date, right? In this example, we've got how many deposits, how many withdrawals, all the fees, etc. And we'll get into those fees in a little bit. But those are the two numbers that you're really going to want on your statement. What was your beginning balance? What was your ending balance? All right, so let's take a look at the middle statement. Mid statement is going to be anything from a couple of lines to many pages. It just depends on how many transactions you've had per month. Clearly, if this is an account you use very frequently for your daily business or what have you, it's going to have more transactions than a person who uses this account for just your utility bills per month, which is, some people, set it up that way, right? So your statement description is going to be set up in one of two ways. Let's call them a category of transactions or chronological, right? So no matter what, it should always include the date of the transaction, a description of the transaction, and the amount of the transaction, right? But sometimes the bank sets it up that it's all the purchases are lumped together and all the deposits are lumped together. So you've got the withdrawals and the deposits, right? So all of your deposits are at once. In this case, we'll see that all of the withdrawals have been lumped together at the same time. Again, that might be done chronologically, where it's like, okay, December 1st, you've got a deposit. December 2nd, you've got all these transactions. December 15th, you've got a deposit, all these transactions. That might be the way it is. There's no standardization as far as that, no regulation on how it should be set up. It is really just a point of your bank. Later on, we're going to get into how some banks use the structure of the statement in order to increase fees. But for now, we're just looking at this, right? Okay, so the description is going to be the biggest problem for most people because it could be as nebulous as humanly possible or as descriptive as humanly possible. So for example, sometimes you'll see something like an ATM withdrawal, and that's all the information you're going to get. Sometimes you get ATM withdrawal, Chase Bank ATM on 701 Midlothian Avenue, etc. Right? So it is unfortunate that oftentimes we, as the consumer, really do have to remember where that ATM happened, as opposed to, getting a good description all the time. Same thing with debit purchases or your ACHs. It might be something like ACH Netflix, and that's great. Then you know what you're paying for, recurring debit Netflix. Sometimes it might be ACH Amazon. Now, obviously, your line items here are not going to go into, you bought 2 gallons of milk, 1 loaf of bread, 60 eggs, whatever it is you bought. It's not going to give you the full receipt, but ideally you're going to want the line item and the description thereof to have something like, online transaction / Amazon, as opposed to just online transaction. And that really, again, does depend on what your bank's statement standardization is set up to do. Okay, let's take a look at the transaction date. So I mentioned before that banks sometimes can order the transactions into a way that allows them to charge more fees, right? This really does depend on the transaction date. So a bank typically defines the transaction date as the day that the actual purchase, deposit, or withdrawal is initiated or it occurred. So again, that's when it actually happened, right? But they could also use what's called a posting date, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you went to that ATM on 8/4. Perhaps it posted on 8/4 and you went very late on 8/3, right? So the posting date and the transaction date are very different, and it depends on what your bank uses as the date of that transaction, right? So again, a posting date is when the transaction is finalized. The transaction date is when it actually occurred, so when you bought the item as opposed to when it posted to your account. There's a couple of factors that can alter when the posting date is or when the transaction date is actually. So for example, transaction made after a bank's cutoff time, right? So let's say the cutoff time is 5 p.m. on a weekend or weekday, or if it was posted on a weekend or a holiday, right? Those are typically posted next business day. So the same thing goes for the merchant that you're purchasing from, right? So if a merchant delays submitting that transaction to your bank, the charge is not going to show up on your account until they submit that transaction. So the vendor submits that transaction. This is especially the case for paper checks. I know nobody uses paper checks anymore, but well, some people do, but it's very rare. Paper checks, and then large deposits that can be delayed or held as long as the bank takes to verify the funds, right? So why would a vendor do that? There's a couple of reasons. Smaller businesses might want to submit all of their transactions at once per day in order to minimize the transaction fees. Likewise, a large organization like Target may lump those all together as, to get some sort of discount from one of the major credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, something like that. So it really is their purview as far as when they submit those transactions. And then again, it's the bank's purview as far as when they post it. So, if it was submitted at one point in time by the vendor, maybe the bank is going to post it the following day because it was received after 5 p.m. All right. So for many banks, the fees that they charge you are found at the end of the statement. Now, granted, if we're talking about recurring charges, like a subscription fee or something like that from the bank, it might be found within that list of transactions that we talked about earlier, right? So there's a law called Truth in Savings Act. It's the Regulation DD. You're not going to have to remember that, but just remember that this is your protection, right? So under Regulation DD, the bank has to provide you with clear, written, and retainable fee disclosures. And I'm going to say the word disclosure about 40,000 times during this workshop because it's so important. This is what I want you just to retain the information that your disclosure is the most important thing you're ever going to receive as far as your account goes, and that you should have a copy on it. It is your right to have a copy on it, a copy of it, and that copy needs to be clear, written, and comprehensible. So a person, with an average education and an average intellect is going to be able to understand what those fees are per the disclosure, right? You should get that within 30 days of opening the account. That is absolutely the regulation. So the one thing, though, is that banks are not required to disclose fees for services offered to both account holders and non-account holders. So what does that mean, right? How do you get into a bank and get their services if you're not an account holder? That can be things like notary services or not wire transfers, but money orders. So traveler's checks, things like that. So if you go into a bank and you want something notarized, maybe they'll charge you $5, maybe $35, but any person can walk in for those notary services. If anyone can walk in for those notary services, they don't have to tell you about that in their disclosures. What they do have to tell you about are things like monthly maintenance fees, return check fees, ATM fees, insufficient fund charges, which is NSF charges, excessive transaction fees, paper statement fees, activity fees, stop payment charges, check printing fees, overdraft charges. It goes on and on and on and on and on. All right. So when we're looking at the end of the statement, if your fees are listed at the end of the statement as opposed to within the document itself, within that transaction list, take a look at it, really analyze it, look for unfamiliar charges, look for duplicate charges, look for multiple small charges because those are an indicator of fraud or phishing, and then look for any subscriptions that you're not interested in anymore. You can cancel those, or if your subscriptions have increased and you weren't notified of it, like, we've all gotten a notification that our Netflix or Hulu, Disney Plus, all the subscription streaming fees, those have all increased every year since we've gotten them. But obviously if they increase and you don't know about it, that's something you have to look into. All right. So let's pivot to overdraft practices. This is going to be a big chunk of our presentation today. So for anybody who's unfamiliar with overdraft protection, and God bless you if you are, that's the best thing it could possibly be. If you are unfamiliar, though, overdraft protection is an optional product. Big emphasis on optional product, right? It's not regulation. It's not something you have to have. It's something you can opt out of, actually. So it's an optional product that banks provide, and effectively they cover a transaction if you don't have enough money in your account to cover it. So, but obviously they charge you for it. Here's another cute little quiz. Like, if you want to answer it in the chat, you're welcome to. But how much is a bank allowed to charge in overdraft fees? Right? Is it $5? Is it whatever they want? Is it one charge per month and that's it? The answer is number 2. they can charge whatever they want. They can charge one fee per month if you overdrafted at all for the month. They can more frequently they charge per overdraft, per transaction. So as long as the bank discloses what that overdraft charge is when you open the account, and if they change the overdraft charge terms, they have to tell you within those 30 days. But anyway, as long as they disclose it, they can charge whatever they want. The standard is between $5 and $35 per transaction, but really there's no regulation anymore that says that they can't charge $100,000. Like they can absolutely do it. This wasn't always the case. You might remember that a couple of years ago, overdraft charges were capped at $5. There was a Consumer Finance Protection Bureau ruling, but which was unfortunately overturned on Congress on Valentine's Day 2025. It used to say that only $5 per transaction, but that's not the case anymore. So just to reiterate, federal laws no longer specify a maximum amount for transaction, no maximum dollar amount for overdraft fees. So banks can do whatever they want, and as long as they disclose that you are going to be charged and what that number is, they can do it. All right. We're going to go over the pitfalls of overdraft practices, overdraft protection, and having that on your account. But again, I want us to reiterate that this is something you can decline. You don't have to have this. A lot of times the bank will include overdraft protection when you open a checking or a savings account, often a checking account. But they should be asking you right off the bat if you want this. They may include in their disclosures that you are automatically enrolled in overdraft protection, but you can call them up at any point in time and say no thank you. This is not an obligatory product, and I would encourage you to say no thank you to this, and we'll get into that why and what happens if you enroll yourself, right? So again, contact your bank immediately. This is not a product you want, right? So overdraft protection has, the main issue is it has a tendency to avalanche into a series of financial issues that have true long-term impacts on your financial health, right? Again, banks are allowed to charge whatever they want, and they often charge you multiple times a day. If you have multiple overdrafts, there's no reason why they wouldn't charge you multiple times a day. They can also charge you extended overdraft fees on top of the standard overdraft charges. Also called a multiple day fee, and basically that is when overdraft protection fees are applied per transaction rather than per day. And then you get the extended overdraft fee if your balance remains underdrawn, like if you don't have enough money and you've had this overdraft protection. If you go a few days with a negative balance, they can also charge you a fee on top of that. So another problem is that if your overdraft protection is linked to a credit card or a line of credit, it's treated as a cash advance. And cash advance often comes with very high APRs. So 25% right now is pretty standard. So if it is treated like a cash advance from a line of credit, you would incur the overdraft charge. So let's say it's $35. You would incur that per transaction on top of that 25% APR interest charge. So another issue is that the posting order of your purchases can influence the fees. So many banks process daily purchases from most expensive, so highest dollar amount, to least expensive, lowest dollar amount, right? As opposed to, I bought it at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., right? So what that does for a person who has overdraft protection on is it amplifies the overdraft charges and the number of overdraft charges that you can be charged, right? So, for example, let's say you have $110 in your account. You make one purchase at 9 a.m. for $50, and then you make a second purchase at 5 p.m. of $120, right? So if the bank posted in chronological order 9 p.m. and 5 p.m., you would be only charged for one overdraft fee, right? You had $120, you have $110 in your account, you take out that $50 at 9 p.m., you're still good. And then at 5 p.m., you take out that $120 purchase, oh my gosh, now you're overdraft. But the problem is that many banks don't do it that way. They don't take it in chronological order. They would post your $120 charge first, then they would post your $50 charge, which means both of those would incur a let's say it's $35 overdraft charge. Both of those would incur a $35 charge. Now amplify that by however many charges, right? And then if you combine this with the what we discussed in the previous slides, where sometimes a vendor doesn't post until the next day, or maybe the bank doesn't post until 5 p.m., really the timing of it can mean just a snowball effect of those overdraft charges. So, maybe if everything posted at the time exactly when the transaction happened, you'd be okay and you'd have the cash in your account. But okay, now your deposit took too long and the charges didn't post on time. The charges posted before the deposited cash or something like that. The long of it is that the timing of the post and the way in which a bank approaches how they post your transactions can amplify, can increase the amount of overdraft charges you receive. So probably the most important is this bullet point right here, the last bullet point. Overdraft protection truly can catalyze a cycle of debt, right? So if you are in a place where you don't have the cash in your account and you have an option to purchase or not purchase, sometimes we don't have that option, but if you do have the option of it, what ends up happening more frequently is that when we make these purchases, they incur overdraft protection fees. By the time your paycheck hits the account, you're paying off the negative balances that have ballooned because of OP charges. They ballooned, and so now a significant portion of your check is being consumed with OP charges. So, what does that mean for next month? Now you have less cash to cover your bills because so much of it went towards your overdraft protection. And now the cycle continues, right? So if you have 1/5 the amount of cash you had last month, perhaps you're going to be utilizing your overdraft protection again. Then you're paying more fees on top of fees on top of fees. So, the issue, of course, is if we have to use overdraft protection because we simply don't have the cash, is there another way? Or, does this end up catalyzing a cycle of debt? So long story short, yes, obviously there are moments in time where we don't have the cash to cover our very needed bills. Overdraft protection might be something that we look to in order to save us from those instances, but to the point you do have to weigh the financial health long term, and if overdraft protection is going to hurt you or if it's going to benefit you, right? So here's our takeaways. Like I said before, reading your bank statements is the most important thing. Disclosures are going to be where you are going to find out about the charges, how much it is, etc. Knowing how your bank posts those charges in what transaction order versus posting order, how much is the overdraft protection costing you per the transaction, and then if you don't need it, don't use it. If you can avoid it, please do. Again, I'm going to reiterate, sometimes we're not in that position. Sometimes it's a matter of I need this overdraft protection once or twice this month so I can carry myself into next month. And okay, maybe it's only $5 a hit, so I'll take that $10 hit if it means I can pay my bills this month versus next month, fine. But please be aware of it. All financial products have disclosures attached to them, and as long as you are educated and it's a choice you're making as opposed to someone taking advantage of you, that is ultimately your choice. All right, let's pivot to common admin products offered by your bank. So these are like OPs. They have the potential to increase your list of fees and how much money you end up giving the bank per month to hold your money in an account, right? So these are sometimes showing up on your account as surprise fees. Again, these should be in your disclosures. We'll get into what happens if they're not. But they are notoriously difficult to cancel. They're frequently pitched to us as services that the bank offers, and they're typically pitched to a client when they start an account or open a new line of credit, or sometimes you'll get that thing in the mail that says, hey, if you open a new bank account today, we'll give you $200. So that's the point where they bring you in and they pitch these products, right? So these add-on products. These are optional. These are fee-based services. You can decline them at the time that you open the account, and you can cancel them if you want to when you're not using them. Unfortunately, they are not easy to cancel. So oftentimes the bank will require you to come in person, or go through a lengthy process, or fill out some sort of ridiculous form, etc. Right? Um, Unfortunately, there was a really cool law called Click to Cancel that existed under the Federal Trade Commission final rule, and it basically said like, hey, you know, if a product could be activated online, it should be able to be canceled online. And yeah, that was great actually, but sadly it was vacated by a federal appeals in July 2025, so that FTC click to cancel rule no longer applies. There is a bill right now in the Illinois legislature called SB 3562, which will actually bring those benefits to Illinois residents. It's called it updates the Automatic Contact Renewal Act. But basically it includes all the rights that FTC click to cancel law would include. I think it goes under debate and vote on the 15th. So we have 2 days to see if Illinois residents will receive that protection, and I hope that is the case. All right. So add-on products can often be called junk fees, right? That's the one thing that the CFPB really pushed out there, right? Like that was the buzzword. It's a junk fee, right? Sometimes these add-on products are predatory. Sometimes they're near predatory. Sometimes they can just be accessed for free anywhere else. So why buy them? Sometimes they don't sometimes they don't deliver what the bank advertises they're going to do. But oftentimes they're sold as like premium features. So what is a premium feature, right? So a premium bank account is oftentimes one that requires you to have a significantly higher bank balance. So $20,000, $25,000, right? And the premium features are sold as like your reward for having that money there. But let's face it. So a premium feature like a slightly higher interest rate on an account that only gives you 0.005% interest rate. Okay, what is a higher interest rate? It's not going to be 5%. It's not going to be 9%. And premium features like I could access something else on my app, a feature on the app that's not available before, or oh God, we had a premium feature advertised to us as access to a human customer service as opposed to an AI customer service. So the long story short is you're paying this monthly charge for a premium bank account, but you're effectively locking in your ability to move that cash around. So maybe you'd want to put that into like a high yield savings account or a money market or something where your investments would actually yield you some dividends per year, right? But instead, you're giving up the ability to move the account money or move your money into a better account to earn a higher interest rate. And you're paying for the premium features just to park your account in a low interest, just to park your money into a low interest account. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So I've never been a fan of the premium feature accounts that require you to pay. And also I've never seen a premium feature that was better than earning more money in a higher interest account, right? Other features include things like credit protection services, which I'm so not a fan of, and we'll get into that. These are also called debt protection or credit insurance. These are sold to account holders as a buffer against crisis, right? So the theory is that the protection plan will allow the account holder to pause your credit card payments for a set time frame, perhaps, or some of them have balance forgiveness involved or minimum payment forgiveness, and that's attached to a qualifying crisis. And the account disclosures define what that qualifying crisis is, right? So typically these are $1 to $1.50 per $100. So if you owe $4,400, $4,400 on your bill, your protection cost for that month is $44. For the next days, you're paying in advance, right? So even though your bill features what you've already bought, you're paying for in advance, right? So again, let's say it's $1 per $100. It's $44 for an account that has a balance of $4,400. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but the issue is that these are products that are really marketed toward high balanced individuals. So $4,400 is unfortunately not that high nowadays. This would probably be marketed to someone who has $12,000, $20,000 due or owed to the bank, right? Typically, these are marketed to people who have high balances, or people who have a late payment history, folks who have a history of only paying the minimum balances, folks like that. So obviously that would be a demographic of folks that would be attracted to a product that would potentially benefit them in a time of crisis. But those are also the folks that, because of their high balance, generates a very high monthly income for the bank based on this product cost, right? Okay, so I'll move on beyond that. So the issue that folks face when they are interacting with credit protection products is either that they were automatically enrolled, we're finding a lot of that, or that when they tried to cancel, it was very difficult, right? So sometimes people are auto-enrolled when they reach a certain balance or when they miss a payment, something like that, right? So beyond being a hard time canceling, beyond the auto-enrollment, another feature is that folks are having a hard time cashing in on the, if they have a crisis, right? So if they have a crisis and they try to make a claim off on these credit protection things, they find out that certain things that have happened to them have canceled their policy, right? So this could be something like, I've been paying $44 a month for so many months. I miss a payment, right? Because I lose my job. But I think to myself, oh, it's okay. I've got this credit protection. I'll just call my bank. Not realizing that if I miss a payment, the entire protection goes away. You are automatically canceled. So everything you've paid up until that point, you basically donated to the bank. And now that you're facing the actual crisis, because you missed that one payment, you have absolutely no protection, and you have to make those payments now immediately, right? So that's the issue with making the claims as far as missing a payment or something like that. But there could be also that you were denied a claim because of some minor detail you overlooked. Like, for example, let's say you lost your job, but you lost your job for cause, right? That's a common reason that people don't get their claims approved, right? Or if you lost your job, you didn't lose your job, you quit your job. Even if you quit your job because your boss was sexually harassing you, or the workplace was abusive or unsafe or anything like that, you voluntarily left that job, and therefore it voids the claim. So there's a lot of things like that. Also, health reasons. Like sometimes if you can't work anymore because you have a health reason and you didn't, disclose the fact that there was a pre-existing health condition, or specific types of not covered disability, something like that. Like if the loss of employment was due to that, and that's the reason that you can't make your payments, you'll find out very soon that there's so many provisions as far as what is covered and what is not covered. In the same way that normal health insurance does, that normal life insurance does, all the insurances does. But with these products, with credit protection, two things: it happens more frequently that someone is denied a claim than normal insurances. And then secondarily, when a person does file a claim, unlike with health insurance or with life insurance or homeowners insurance, the average payout is 21 cents on the dollar invested. So for every dollar a person puts into a credit protection account, it's unlikely that they'll see more than 21 cents. And that's not purposeful, especially considering that, however months you paid that $44 in premium fees, you could have putting that towards your bank balance, right? Okay, well, I'll move on. We'll go to another one of my pet peeves, which is identity theft monitoring, also called credit monitoring, right? So a credit monitoring service monitors your credit, right? And alerts you when either a new account has been opened in your name, a new application has been made in your name, rather, or if something new shows up on your credit report, or some sort of crisis or unusual activity, right? So the idea is if somebody opens an account in your name, you get an alert. So, or if you added an authorized user, or if you're suddenly you've got all this activity on your report. Now, obviously, as housing counselors, we encourage our clients to monitor their credit report religiously, right? But there's zero reason to pay someone to do this. There's no reason to give your bank $20 a month for identity theft monitoring, and for two reasons, really. Firstly, you can get your report for free. You don't have to go through your bank for it. In fact, many banks provide the actual report for free at all times. Now, granted, you're not going to get your credit score for free. A credit score is a proprietary product provided by either FICO or provided by Vantage. But you get your report, and that's really where the fraud would be identified regardless, right? If it shows up on your credit report, you can access it for free. And yes, there's a billion ways you can access your credit report for free. We always say, at the very least, you can go once a year to annualcreditreport.com, which is the only government-run credit report site. And of course, you can download your credit report, not your credit scores, but your credit report for free. And then secondly, credit identity theft monitoring does not prevent anything. They only alert you when something has happened. So it's not as if you are preventing someone from opening an account in your name. You're not preventing somebody from using your social security number. You're not preventing anything. They're just alerting you. So no fraud is being stopped. It's just they're sending you a notification if an alert happens, right? So to a point, if you're already monitoring your credit report by yourself through either the three bureaus, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, through one of the many ways you can do that, or by going to annualcreditreport.com, you're going to notice this regardless. And in addition, if you want to prevent identity theft, if you want to prevent people from opening an account in your name, freeze your credit report. You should be freezing your credit report. If you have no intention of opening a new account, freeze your credit report immediately. It is a free service. You will just call up the three credit bureaus. Some of them also have the ability to do so online, though you're going to have to make an account. Please don't pay for this either, by the way. At the very least, if you want to call them up and just say, I'd like to freeze my credit, it's free. Call the three bureaus, freeze your credit. Freezing your credit doesn't allow anybody, including yourself, to open a new account. You can't apply for credit, you can't open a new account, etc. You can't even open a utility account, right? And then if you want to move on, apply for a new credit card, get a car loan, get a house loan, you just call the bureaus right back up and you say, I'd like to unfreeze my credit. So to summarize, don't pay for things that are provided for free. Weigh the true benefits of premium features. Weigh your ability to move your money into a higher interest account, and really weigh what add-on products are being offered to you. And if you do review your statement and you see these add-on fees, immediately begin to request their removal. And if you never were disclosed those fees, if you never agreed to them, maybe request a reimbursement for months previous as well. All right, let's move on. Punitive fees. So banks are always finding creative ways to charge you for things that seem reasonable. So obviously there are many ways if you can interact with the account that a bank doesn't like, they're going to charge you for it. So let's say you want to close the account, some banks charge you for that. Maybe your bank requires you to use your account so many times per month. They could charge you for that if you don't use it for 4 or 5 times per month, whatever their requirements are, right? If you ask for a printed statement, or if you use your ATM too often, or what have you. There's a million ways your bank can say, we don't like what you're doing, we don't like that you're not doing this, so we're going to charge you a fee for these things as well. So these should also be included in your disclosures, which I'm going to say again, it's the most important thing to read. If you have any kind of bank account, you should be requesting the disclosures from that bank account and reading over them, right? If your bank charges you a percentage of the account balance, or if they charge you a particular amount, $5 for a paper statement or what have you, that should be included in your disclosures. So again, another reason to request those disclosures, read them through, and then contact the bank if you don't like what's on those disclosures. Or excuse me, if you don't like what they're charging you for. All right, let's look at common forms of bank malpractices, right? So everything we talked about before is terrible, and it can cost a person a lot of money in the long run. But are they malpractice? Probably not, right? If it is in the disclosures, if the bank disclosed to you, and did you agree to this, it's probably not fraud, it's probably not bank malpractice, right? Fraud and bank malpractice are terms that are very narrowly defined by people much smarter than me and who've probably done this some time ago, right? But also to a point, bank malpractice and bank fraud are very severely punished. And we'll get into like how that happens and how you can report in a little bit. So let's look at what this actually means, though, because it is important to understand the difference between the bank has charged me for something cruddy that I think stinks, versus the bank has actually committed a form of malpractice, right? So let's go through these. So failing in its duty of care. This can occur when a financial institution breaches, fails its legal obligations to act in the client's best interest, the customer's best interest, right? So the key of this is that it has to end in some sort of financial loss, right? So if it results in significant financial loss, this could qualify as failing in its duty of care. So it's a very broad term, obviously, and it can include actions like failing to prevent fraud, especially after it's been identified, failing to adequately train employees, theft from its employees, embezzlement, failure to execute a transaction. So if you sent a wire transfer today for your house and it doesn't go through until next week, even though that was something you were supposed to do, obviously that's mostly automated nowadays, but you get the point. So effectively this category covers any harm done that the bank was solely in its power to avoid. Negligence and misselling involves deliberately or negligently recommending an unsuitable investment product. So an insurance product that you cannot use, or interest rate hedging, or just not explaining the risks. Like if they pump up a product and they don't explain the risks of investment to the client, that can be categorized as negligence or misselling, right? Also fraud or mispractice, and really depending on the actions of that bank, right? Breach of fiduciary duty. So not all accountants, not all bank employees, not all banks are fiduciaries, right? So when the bank acts as your trustee or an executor of your account or your main investor or custodian for your assets, then they are bound by fiduciary duties, right? So a fiduciary duty is the absolute highest standard of care. And so it requires the fiduciary, the one party, to act in the best interest of another person, so the beneficiary. So your fiduciary must act in your best interest as opposed to their best interest or the best interest of their employer, right? So your bank, actually a lot of banks, have a disclosure on the main part of the page that says something that they are not a fiduciary. Let me read you what Bank of America has on theirs. It says, Bank of America, N.A., and the U.S. Trust Company of Delaware, collectively known as the bank, do not serve in a fiduciary capacity with respect to all products and services. So obviously they're washing their hands of their responsibility, and they're letting you know that they are not a fiduciary and they work in their best interest rather than your best interest, right? So if a bank has been established as a fiduciary or having a fiduciary duty to you, and they breach that, they discard that duty, they work in their best interest, that can be a form of malpractice or fraud. Okay, easy ones to understand: unauthorized activities or unauthorized hidden fees. This basically is just if the bank allows transfers or withdrawals, or account changes or opening an account, etc., without proper authorization. A little bit ago, Wells Fargo got into a lot of trouble because they kept opening accounts for clients that didn't authorize that, right? Same thing with hidden fees. We talked a little bit about, we've talked a lot about how the bank has to disclose to you what those fees are. So hidden fees, if it's worked into the disclosures, it's not necessarily hidden. You are required to read those and sign off on those. But if they are unauthorized, if you never agreed to them, if you never got the disclosures, etc., those could be considered malpractice. So, okay, so long short things is that a great deal of bank services nickel and dime you. I mean, that is the truth. It's not necessarily fraud, right? It's not necessarily malpractice. As long as you agree to it, as long as you sign the disclosures, it's not necessarily the case that the bank has done something wrong, which puts the impetus on us as account holders to really read those, to request the disclosures, to cover our own butts, and act in our best interests as well. All right, this is my favorite part, which is your rights. So this is our last topic, which is going to be your rights and reporting misconduct. So we did talk about what was not considered fraud, what was not considered misconduct, but we will be talking about if you do find misconduct or you do need a complaint to be resolved, how you're gonna do that, right? But first, let's go over what the regulations are that cover you. So the first of which is going to be Regulation E through the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. So Regulation E, which covers electronic funds transfers, EFTs, right? So this protects you by limiting the liability for unauthorized electronic transactions, and it provides this framework for banks to investigate errors and resolve them. So, we've all been contacted by, the fraud department at our banks. This is why that happens, right? Because Regulation E has created this really cool framework by which the bank have to go through a bunch of practices and effectively have to contact us, have to resolve things in a particular way, right? So this covers debit cards, ACH transfers, ATM transactions, it was called a P2P, point of sale payments. So, at the Jewel Osco, et cetera, but it also covers like Zelle or Cash App, and it caps your liability for unauthorized transfer. So, for example, if you find the fraud or an unauthorized charge within 2 days, your liability is capped at $50. Oftentimes the bank doesn't make you pay anything, but if they didn't make you pay something, it would be $50, right? If you find out the transaction and report it between 3 and 60 days, your liability is $500. So if you let 60 days pass, right after that 60 days, you could lose everything. So the key is to get it under that 2 days. So what does that mean? It means we have to look at our savings and our checking statements every single day. I know it's a pain in the butt. It can be very depressing to look at your bank account every day, but to a point, if we're looking for fraud and you want to minimize your liability, that 2-day period is the sweet spot where all you would be liable for. In the worst case scenarios, even if they bought a Mercedes G-Wagon with your credit, all you're going to be liable for is that $50, right? Okay, so Regulation E also says that if you report an error or an unauthorized charge, the bank has to investigate it, and they have to do so within 10 days. That's a huge thing because that wasn't always the case. The bank could take their sweet time if they wanted to back in the day, right? It also says that if it takes longer than that 10 days, they have to offer you a credit line to account for the amount that you were questioning. So let's say somebody does steal your account, they get into your account, they buy that G-Wagon with your money, and the bank has not investigated or completed their investigation within 10 days, the bank has to offer you however much they spent on that G-Wagon in a line of credit while they continue investigating. So you're not penalized because someone stole your money and bought that very fancy car. You still have access to those funds, right? And it says that you are protected from overdraft fees that you would not have incurred had that person not taken your money. So obviously, if they took something out of your account, if you had overdraft fees prior to that and they were not incurred because of the theft, those aren't covered. But if the theft incurred overdraft fees, if that was the catalyst for those overdraft fees, you're covered and they can't charge you those too. And that includes for the ATM, debit cards, anything like that, right? And then lastly, Regulation E says that your bank, well, any financial institution, but we're talking about bank, must provide all of your terms, including the fees that we've discussed, what your liability is, what the procedures are, what the complaint is, what the error processing is too. So we've talked about disclosures a billion times in this workshop. This is Regulation E is what says that a bank must provide those to you. All right, so we also have TISA, which is the Truth in Savings Act, and TILA, which is the Truth in Lending Act, right? TILA can also be called Regulation DD, right? So Regulation DD protects you by requiring financial institutions to provide the same thing that Regulation E does, right? So clear standardized disclosures that include fees, interest rates, APY, and the terms on which the deposit account operates, right? So your savings account, your checking account, and CD. It also prevents deceptive advertising, and it also says that you're not allowed to have any surprise fees. So the surprise fees have to be disclosed. They can't be surprise fees, right? TILA says that you have the right to banking protections, and that includes it restricts how lenders change your interest rates. Basically what you contract for as far as interest rates go. It protects against unfair billing practices. It limits your liability for unauthorized charges. And then that's where that $50 also is, the $50 for the 2-day period, that's where that comes in as well too. So TILA also states that lenders cannot use misleading advertising. And like if they use a specific term, like if they say, oh, we've got low interest rates, they have to say what that low interest rate is, right? So they have to have what's called material terms included in the advertisement. If they say something like low interest rates, they have to say what the APR is. All right. So if we do think that our bank has violated any of those laws or something else, or has committed malpractice, who do we talk to, right? So every one of these agencies that we'll talk about is going to require you to do a couple of things across the board. So let's just get that out of the way. So the first step is you have to contact the bank. If you haven't given the bank the opportunity to resolve the issue, none of these agencies are going to give you the time of day. And when we work with a client who has a complaint for any one of these agencies, the first thing I tell them is you're going to cover your butt, you're going to keep all the documentation. So it's good to correspond in email, it's good to correspond in letters, something that is date and time stamped, because every one of these agencies are going to request a date and time. They're going to request who at the bank or the financial institution you spoke to, what was the conversation about, etc. So sometimes they will accept your handwritten notes. I'm a big fan of note taking, so that's great. But sometimes they won't because it's not an official date and timestamp, etc. So what does that mean? When you contact your bank, they may not give this to you, but it is also wise to request that you get some sort of email and do a follow-up conversation. Ask for an ombudsman, ask for customer service, whatever it is. So even if you resolve the conversation with that one call, if you resolve your conflict with that one call, you're going to write that follow-up email and say, hey, Janet from Bank of America, thank you so much for talking to me today, May 13th, 2026. I was so pleased that we were able to resolve our conflict, which was, and then you put your complaint down there, etc. And then, per our conversation, you have committed to doing X, Y, and Z. I have committed to doing blah, 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 and it will resolve by this date, which means the conversation that you have with whoever it is at your bank has to be productive. So you have to prepare yourself before calling them by identifying what has happened. Oftentimes when we have some sort of weird thing happen with our money, we get very emotional. God knows I do. And we don't stop to think, okay, what has actually happened? Do your research, get your head nice and level, and then present the information. Even if you have to do it, put it on a piece of paper in front of you. So when you call up their ombudsman, when you call up their customer service line, you actually have something to say. And that should be this. It should be, this is what has happened. This is why it is incorrect. This is what I'd like you to do about it. Be reasonable. They're not going to give you $1,000 for a $50 charge, right? So if somebody charged your account for $50, they're not going to hand you a box of kittens and a brand new house. They're going to give you your $50 back. So be reasonable about what you'd like to resolve this with. Come at them with a reasonable resolution. So, hey, you've charged me an overdraft fee of $35. If you notice, this transaction occurred at 9 a.m. when I had the money in my account. Or, hey, if this had been deposited at 10 a.m. as opposed to, you depositing it at 2 p.m. the next day, it would have not incurred an overdraft charge. I would like you please to remove the overdraft charge. Something like that, right? So here's what happened. Here's why it's incorrect. Here's how I'd like you to resolve it. So And of course, remember that the person answering the call, no matter what institution you're calling, what bank you're calling, they don't own the bank. Their last name isn't Chase. Their last name isn't of America. They are probably the front line, and they probably have very limited capacity to resolve your problems. Maybe they're able to reverse an overdraft protection or a fee or something like that. But it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to do much more beyond that. So what they can do and where their power really lies is to move you forward in the process. So my advice to everybody is save your rage for somebody higher up the chain. If the person on the front line is being disrespectful, obviously you want to tell them, I do not want to speak with you. I would like to speak with somebody in a higher position, which is your right. You're going to do it respectfully because you've got dignity, but please don't ever be abusive to somebody on the front line. They have very limited powers, which are, of course, limited to passing you up the chain or hanging up the phone, etc. Okay, everybody, now that we've gotten that nonsense out of the way, so let's review some options, right? After you talk to the bank, after you've collected all of your documentation, after you've got all of your evidence in front of you, you are going to contact the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Now, I should say that you can contact all of these at the same time. There is nothing stopping you from contacting every single one of these at the same time, and to a point, it might be a good idea because the more advocacy you have and the more routes you take, if they are applicable to your case, the better, right? So we're going to contact the CFPB immediately for a couple of reasons. Let me say before I move into that, though, a lot of folks have a misconception about what the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau does. They are not your immediate advocate. The process is very simple. You upload a complaint to their website, you get a complaint number, that you upload your documentation. You must upload information like who at the bank you talked to, what documentation you have. They're always going to require evidence, and the more evidence you have to make your case, the better your case will go. So they will take your evidence, they will assign you a case number, and then they will reach out to the bank. The bank will provide their evidence, and that is that. A lot of folks think the CFPB is there to be your advocate and your legal representation and to fight for you specifically, and that's simply not the case. They are a fine organization, but it's just not their purpose to do that. So what their purpose is to provide both you and the bank an opportunity to resolve the issue between you and really voice your complaint in that way. The CFPB uses those complaints ultimately to identify trends in malpractice and trends in scams and trends in all of these other things, and then to identify those threats on a nationwide basis and either create regulations or go after individual organizations who have that habit, right? So if they see that Joe's Bank has a habit of predatory lending or discriminatory lending or not disclosing fees, if they get a couple of complaints about that, they are going to go after Joe's Bank or perhaps create some regulation that doesn't already exist. But they're not going to be your personal attorney and hound this guy down, right? The cool thing they do, though, is they offer, they allow you to say yes or no, I want this complaint to be published. Most people say yes. But so the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau publishes all the complaints on their website. And a great thing to do, if you are inclined to look at reviews from Yelp or the Better Business Bureau, is to also include the CFPB in that list of places that you're going to look at the reviews. Because you can go through the common complaints from a financial organization and say, oh, wow, it looks like Joe's Bank has the predilection towards charging these fees without disclosures, or this is a complaint that a lot of people have, or whatever it is. So you can then use your education and your power as a consumer to choose, yes, I'm going to go with Joe's Bank. No, I'm not going to go with Joe's Bank. Obviously, I made up Joe's Bank. Please don't sue me, Joe's Bank, if you exist. But you have the power as a consumer to say yes or no, I will put my money here, I will not. So, so that is the purpose of the CFPB. There is generally a 30-day turnaround time with them, even though they are a little bit slowly because they are understaffed. But to a point, it is generally speaking an easy process, and they have an online portal where you can check updates to your account and look at the evidence that the lending institution has sent over, etc. Okay. Now, in Illinois, you also can report to the Attorney General's office, the Office of Professional Regulations if the institution or persons, because the IDFPR regulates a bunch of industries. I believe they include real estate agents as well as funeral directors and I think barbers. So depending on if the IDFPR regulates that industry, you can report to them. For all industries, you can report to the Attorney Generals. So with the IDFPR, firstly, all of the final reports are listed on their IDFPR enforcement report. So just like the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, if you are interested in seeing like if your banking institution has had a couple of problems with the IDFPR, you can go look those up on the enforcement reports, which are on their website. Typically, they're on the front page. The IDFPR sometimes mediates, depending. It's not frequently that happens, but they do not adjudicate. So they do not act as your legal representation, and they do not mediate they do not adjudicate private complaints. So they're not going to act. They're not going to sit down between you and a bank about something on your account, right? So they also do not reward money to you as the complainants. So if you complain against Joe's Bank and you're involving the IDFPR, it's unlikely that they are going to hand you over a check, right? If you want to receive compensation beyond what the IDFPR recommends as far as the resolution to the problem, you have to pursue that in court, and they will not recommend an attorney or anything like that. So a little different with the Attorney General's office. Winning a complaint, like if they find in your favor, generally results in an informal dispute resolution, so refunds, repairs, canceling your contracts if they wouldn't cancel them before, rather than like a court judgment, right? So they see, everyone sees the Office of Attorney General and they assume that, oh, this is going to court. Not the case. So typically they do mediate and investigate. Sometimes they are your personal advocate in that regard, but they are not your attorney. So I know it's kind of an odd thing because this is the Attorney General's office. They are not your private attorney. So it's not like they're going to assign you a personal attorney and that person shows up into court with you, right? If you do want to go to court, always that is your choice. They may tell you, okay, you want to take it to the 19th Circuit Court, or you want to take it to the Cook Court, whatever it is, but they won't provide you an attorney. They won't be your advocate as far as that goes. They might do something as simple as saying, here's Illinois Legal Aid's list of attorneys pro bono, or here is the Illinois Bar Association's list of attorneys in your area. All right. So we also have the regulation bodies that we discussed earlier. So we've got the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or the OCC, the NCUA, which is the National Credit Union Administration, and then, of course, all of our favorite, we've seen it in every bank we've ever walked into, the FDIC, aka the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, right? So for each one of these agencies, you have to make sure that it covers your lending institution or your bank, right? So we talked a little bit about who these guys cover in previous slides. So obviously Credit Union Administration is credit unions, Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, or federal banks, and then FDIC, they have to have members in order to be covered by those people who have FDIC insurance. So each one of these has a website where you can go on, type in your bank's name. Sometimes it'll ask for a banking number, and you can see who is the overseeing body. So if you go to the Comptroller of the Currency, you can see if they're in charge, or obviously if it's got a credit union in the name of the bank, go to the NCUA, etc. Okay, but let's begin with the OCC, the Comptroller of the Currency. We'll talk a little bit about how this works because these are less known organizations. So let's get into it a little bit, right? So with all of these, you're going to gather your documentation first off. And again, the more documentation, the better. If you've got a complaint, we're going to get communication with the bank. We've got to prove that they wouldn't resolve it on their own. You've got, your bank statements and all the other documentation that proves that your complaint is valid, right? So you're going to get that all together. You're going to get the contact information for your bank as well, who you spoke to, if there was a different party that you should have spoke to, but they wouldn't let you speak to them, things like that. Obviously, the OCC, the moment you talk to them, they're going to independently confirm that they oversee your bank. So don't be insulted. They're just going to do it as part of their processes. They will then contact that bank, receive their side of the complaint, point, counterpoint, and then they've got 60 days to send you a result. If it is positive, it's negative for you, whatever it is, 60 days after they receive the complete file. So they're going to ask you for documentation. You have to provide it or else they're not going to go anywhere with your complaint. 60 days after receiving that complete file, they're going to send you a letter summarizing the results. So if it doesn't address your concerns, or if you're not satisfied, or if it does address it and you're like, okay, great, nothing has happened, you just told me I'm right, but it doesn't do anything for me, you can file an appeal for action, right? No matter what, you're going to receive the file number. Make sure you keep that because you're going to need it if you need an update or an appeal on the OCC complaint. Now, if you do win the case, if it involves the OCC, the comptroller, that could be an enforcement action against the bank or what have you. The OCC is going to let you know. That 60-day letter is going to include the final decision and it's going to go to you and the bank, right? So finding in your favor could mean that maybe they found the bank violated lending laws or banking regulations, or that could lead to the bank adjusting your account, refunding you. It could be you don't get anything from it, but the bank readjusts their policies, or maybe the OCC fines the bank and you don't receive any compensation. So keep that in mind. Just because they found in your favor doesn't mean you're going to get a pile of cash. It could be that they adjusted the account to fix the problem, but it doesn't mean you're going to receive compensation. Sometimes all they have to do is change the regulations. So keep that in mind. Now, for credit union complaints, obviously, we're going to go to the NCUA. It's got credit union in the title. You're going to go on their website. You're going to submit the complaint, all the supporting documents, of course. And then the NCUA works in the same way as the other agencies. They forward the complaint to the credit union for their review along with all the documents. And then they request that the credit union actually works with you and give them 60 days in which to do so, right? So first step, you send them all the documentation. Second step, the NCUA reaches out to the credit union, and they say, hey, Joe's credit union, you've got 60 days to get this done, right? Resolve it. So then the credit union is obligated to make a solid effort to resolve the issue with you, right? So within that time, the credit union has to reach back out to the NCUA and say, hey, we've done this, right? I've got 60 days and we've resolved the case. And they send a letter to the NCUA saying everything's A-okay, and that's that, right? Hopefully, that is a reflection of reality. If that credit union sends the NCUA a 60-day letter saying it's resolved, and you're like, it's not resolved, what has been resolved, right? You can then go back to the NCUA and say it has not been resolved, then they start a formal investigation. Likewise, if the credit union does not send that 60-day letter to the NCUA, then they start that formal investigation as well. All right, so then what happens? If they open the investigation and they find in your favor, it then moves towards the Consumer Assistance Center, right? So the CAC. The CAC facilitates the resolution, which mandates that the credit union fix the error, whatever error it made. So whatever caused the conflict in your situation, they have to fix it. And then they have to personally remedy it with you. So they have to reverse fees, fix account inaccuracies, things like that. The NCUA acts in that situation. If they've already been the investigator, they then act as the mediator between you and the credit union to accomplish a fair outcome. And then, of course, they have to ensure that the credit union complies with federal regulations. All right. Then, if you have, your last option is if you have a bank that is covered by the FDIC. So you can reach out to the FDIC in the same way to submit a complaint. The link is right here, of course. After you've submitted the complaint, along with your mountain of evidence, the FDIC is going to assign you a case number, same as everybody else. And then they also do an acknowledgement letter, and they have to have that to you within 14 days. So if you do it today, 14 days from now, calendar days, they have to have something in your hand saying, we acknowledge that you've had a complaint, and here's your complaint number. Within that 14 days, they also ensure that it is an FDIC issue. If it's not, They're really the only organization that says, okay, we will make a deliberate attempt to send the file to the proper organization. So if they find out that it's not an FDIC issue, it's an OCC issue, they send it to the OCC and they let you know. So if it is their issue, if it's an FDIC complaint, they do what everyone else does. They reach out to the bank, requesting their evidence, basically saying, hey, Liz has made this complaint. We'd like your side of it now. And then follow up with them to see if they can resolve it without going to litigation. If it is sent to the bank for review, they have 60 days in which to get a response. So the bank, if you go, they have the first 14 days to get it to the bank. If they've decided it's an FDIC issue, then send it to the bank. That opens that first 60-day period of time in which the bank has to respond. In that 60-day period of time, both the bank and the FDIC can reach out to you for supplemental information. So if you had a conversation with somebody at Joe's Bank that's FDIC covered, and maybe the head honcho or the guy, the person reviewing the complaint doesn't have access to whatever information you have, they'll request some sort of copy from you, which of course is why we have to cover our butts, why we have to keep all the evidence humanly possible, etc. So no matter the conversation, you got to follow it up with that date-stamped email, a date-stamped whatever it is, in order to prove your case if this kind of thing ever comes up. So, all right, they have that 60 days, right? If the FDIC finds in your favor, the Consumer Resource Unit, called the CRU, they are the ones then who take over and they facilitate the resolution. So if you get a refund or if there is account discrepancies that have to be fixed, enforcement of policies, policy changes, they're the ones who take that lead and ensure that that gets done at that FDIC covered institution. All right. I know it was quite a lot of information. It's a ton of information. Does anyone have any questions? I'll look at the chat just quickly. Hold on. Good, we're looking good. All right. Let's take a look here. What I'll do is I will. All right, excellent. If you do have a question, please feel free to either raise your hand or unmute yourself. That's fine too. There we go. Everybody's got the ability to unmute themselves now. All right. Okay, no worries. So everybody should have received an email with the slides. In addition, we always post this to our YouTube channel. Sometimes it takes an hour, sometimes it takes longer than that. So we always say 48 hours from now, we'll have this posted to our YouTube channel. You can also look at the other workshops there as well. We've got a lot of great things coming up in the next couple of weeks. As far as workshops go, we have mini workshops coming up. We have got larger format workshops like this one that take an hour and a half. So if you're interested, there's a huge range of financial literacy workshops, pre-purchase, foreclosure prevention. And if you are interested in foreclosure prevention, we do provide an online class you can take at any point in time. It's free. It's through the provider eHome America. You can literally Google eHome America foreclosure prevention, Lake County Housing Authority, and you'll go directly to the eHome America site. Again, it's free. You're welcome to take it. And if you do need any kind of individual counseling, one-on-one counseling is provided for every resident, regardless for any demographic. We don't care what your income is. We don't care what your demographics are. One-on-one counseling is provided by certified counselors, neutral, educated third parties for free. And you can find that intake form on our website. You can Google Lake County Housing Authority Housing Counseling, and it'll send you to our website where it goes over what all the counseling services are, all of the upcoming workshops, how to apply, how to do our intake form, etc. But yeah, I hope that we get to see you all at our next workshop or at a future workshop, and I do thank you for attending. And again, if you'd like, go ahead and check out our YouTube page in the next 48 hours if you want to review this presentation or any of the other ones we've had in the past. Thank you again. I hope you have a really beautiful day and a wonderful week.